Welcome back to Dirk Island. This segment is worth watching, and we're talking about both Fyre Festival documentaries, Netflix's FYRE, The Greatest Party That Never Happened, and Hulu's FYRE Fraud. And we're trying to answer, and by the way, the reason I have glasses on is because I've got a swollen eye, but...
and I'm wearing them in solidarity.
Yeah, so anyway, apologies for that, and we also thought it was a bit fitting for this ridiculous fake beach documentary extravaganza. But anyway, okay, so... Okay, I'll just come out with it. My two thoughts on both of them are I liked one better than the other, and the first one that I'm going to say is the Netflix one. Now, I know it's slick and it's well produced, and I don't want to say it's otherwise, but this scale is not about whether it's slick or well produced. It's about whether or not it's worth your time to watch. And my answer for the Netflix one is it is maybe worth watching. Now, I say maybe because I just think that although it is slick and it's a funny little story and whatever, like, you could do a lot better with your time. And I think there is a part that bothers me a bit more about the Netflix one, which is the fact that it's co-produced with Jerry Media, and it kind of makes them look good. And because they are
involved in the fraud itself.
Involved in basically running a very effective marketing campaign for this this FYRE Festival, which it didn't exist, and the marketing campaign, all the shots they do is of an island and of models and all the stuff that just didn't exist and never existed. They tried to make it exist, but it didn't exist at the time they did it, and I find that to be a bit it leaves me with a bit of a poor taste in my mouth, and why I downgrade it from maybe its entertainment value to more of like it's maybe worth watching. If you're interested in these kind of like weird fraud documentaries, kind of screwball documentaries, certainly a lot of interesting details, factoids, interviews in this. One story about a guy who says he's willing to try to make it work, willing to like give some public official a blowjob, which who knows if this is even true. But there are some interesting tidbits. But ultimately, I think that this documentary is a bit of it gives you this a bit of a propaganda piece for this marketing campaign that was run, which I find to be a bit distasteful in retrospect and not quite the right perspective. And I actually feel like my perspective was enhanced by watching the Hulu documentary, where someone who did formerly work for that marketing company then gives an outsider's critique on whether or not the company was actively involved in perpetrating something they shouldn't been doing, like suppressing social media comments that were negative and all this kind of stuff, which I feel like, so the Hulu documentary reflects back on the Netflix documentary and makes me view it as less worth watching realistically. So
yeah, I should say, Jerry Media wasn't involved in the fraud. They just worked with Billy McFarland, the fraudster himself. Yeah. But yes, they were. It certainly wasn't totally clean from an ethical perspective. They helped suppress some of the complaints and comments. They helped facilitate, or at least didn't intervene in people actually showing up to the island. So but I will say I enjoyed watching it. Pure entertainment value, I really liked it. It's just like, you don't have to stop what you're doing and watch this if you're not particularly interested.
Okay, yeah, so worth watching. Hulu's FYRE Fraud documentary, I would give it a slightly better review. Probably worth watching. Now, this is really for, if you watch a lot of documentaries, I would say it's probably worth your time for sure. I liked it. I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was ultimately a bit better than the other one, just because I think the fraud is the most interesting part. Seeing it as fraud, as opposed to seeing it as a failed party, like the greatest party that never happened, is a lens that made more sense to me, a lens that was more appealing. And it was also a very slickly produced documentary about a very compelling subject matter. The difference, though, I think, is that the reason this maybe isn't an 8 or 9 or 10 or whatever is because, like, not everyone, if you don't watch this movie, like, it's not going to change your life one iota. You know, it's not a foundational piece that's going to change your worldview, whatever. The other thing that kind of takes it a little bit down is the idea that they really did have to pay this guy to be in the film, which I agree is a bit conflicting. I ultimately think it made the film better to get him involved. This is the main character who perpetrated the fraud. He demanded to be paid, so I think it did ultimately enhance the film, but that's maybe why I do feel like both of them come out a bit morally conflicted, ultimately.
I totally agree. I don't think either one of them is completely clean from a moral perspective. But I will say, they were, for me, being interested, having the time and interest enough, it was fun to watch both in conjunction and draw the comparisons. It's not like you need to pick one. You could watch two, from my perspective. But the Hulu one just adds a little bit more of a critique. But yet again, even though it's a good critique of a section of millennials, I think people are becoming savvy that millennials like aren't one thing, and just because
they don't all wear sunglasses.
Yeah, they don't all wear sunglasses inside, and they're not all Coachella heads like chilling and living their best life. But it's a funny critique, but it's not relevant to society at large or the entire millennial generation.
Agreed completely, and that's the story that gets revealed over more and more of these that you see. You know, it's very interesting to see these Instagram-focused documentaries, but and they all reveal a different element of society. But it is certainly the most parodied version, but not fulsome for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much for watching. If you'd like to continue to follow with us, please subscribe on YouTube, and this is also available as a podcast on Apple Podcasts. Thanks again.
Thanks.